Throughout history, Russia's trajectory has been marked by a unique path of imperial expansion and military conflict. Unlike maritime empires of Western Europe, Russia built its dominance through land, stretching its borders across vast and often inhospitable territories in Eurasia, a feat that still shapes global geopolitics today. In the early stages of its rise, the Grand Duchy of Moscow consolidated lands north of the Oka River, annexing territories such as Yaroslav, Rostov, and Tver. The conquest of Kazan in 1552 and the annexation of Astrakhan shortly after paved the way for Russia's impressive expansion southeast, ensuring dominance over key river routes and access to distant frontiers. The drive for expansion was not merely territorial, it was ideological. Leaders promoted the idea of a civilizing mission, positioning themselves as protectors of Christianity and guardians against foreign threats. As the Russian Empire grew, it clashed repeatedly with powerful neighbors such as the Ottoman and Persian empires, seeking strategic footholds in the Caucasus and Black Sea regions. The Caucasus, in particular, became a prized frontier, deemed at once a bulwark against Europe and a gateway to Asia. By the reign of Peter the Great, Russia had undergone radical transformation. Peter I modernized the Russian state, building a European-style army, establishing the St. Petersburg Academy of Sciences, and launching Russia's first newspaper. His reforms not only professionalized the military and administration, but also entangled the Russian Orthodox Church into the machinery of state, using religion as a tool of cohesion and imperial ideology. Under Catherine the Great, the empire expanded further southward, absorbing territories along the Black Sea and integrating Crimea as a vassal, essentially ending the Ottoman influence in the area. With each victorious conflict, Russia obtained new lands such as the provinces of Batumi, Ardahan, and Kars after campaigns against the Ottomans, and pushed steadily into the Caucasus, altering the demographic and political composition of the region by resettling various Christian groups. The land-based imperialism of Russia differed starkly from Western colonial ventures. While Spain and Britain built overseas empires, Russia's conquests were contiguous, driven both by a need for security and a desire for resources and prestige. The construction of frontier forts and the settlement of frontier lands offered opportunities and hardships, with serfs and peasants frequently relocated or tied to new holdings. Even as serfdom was abolished, many Russian peasants found themselves caught in inequitable systems, fueling social discontent and eventually revolution. By the late 19th century, Russia's presence spanned from Poland in the west to the Pacific in the east, and from the Arctic in the north to the newly acquired Transcaucasian provinces in the south. The empire's expansion into Central Asia alarmed British authorities and led to geopolitical rivalries, best exemplified by the Great Game, a tense period of competition for influence in the region. The question of Russian imperialism is deeply complex. Was it purely an act of aggression, a method of survival among hostile neighbors, or a blend of ambition, ideology, and necessity? Its legacy is a patchwork of cultural integration, economic exploitation, and enduring conflict, a subject that invites us to reflect on the nature of power and the price of empire. If you want to keep exploring the fascinating history of Russia and other empires, don't forget to follow the channel to stay tuned for the next segment. At the dawn of the 20th century, the Russian Empire was a colossus, stretched across continents, yet deeply unstable internally. Imperial ambitions clashed with new adversaries, particularly Japan, culminating in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905. Russia expected an easy victory, but the conflict proved disastrous. Despite a larger population and resource base, Russia's military was poorly coordinated and technologically behind. The Japanese forces, leveraging superior strategy and modern weaponry, inflicted devastating defeats on both the Russian Navy and Army. The loss was not only a blow to national pride, it signaled the limits of Russia's imperial reach in East Asia and fueled widespread anger and resentment at home. The humiliation after Japan's victory, an emerging Asian power defeating one of Europe's strongest empires, was unprecedented. The peace agreement, signed at Portsmouth, not only forced Russia to abandon expansion in Manchuria and Korea, but also left the country in deep turmoil. With defeat came shortages, economic strain, and outrage among both the populace and the military. Within just months of the war's end, the 1905 Russian Revolution erupted, unleashed by a groundswell of strikes, protests, and peasant uprisings. The infamous Bloody Sunday Massacre, when peaceful protesters were gunned down by imperial guards in St. Petersburg, further radicalized the country's mood. This period marked a turning point. Workers demanded better wages, legal rights, and representation. Peasants attacked landlords and government officials, angered by land shortages and rising taxes. The revolution nearly toppled the Tsarist order. The imperial government survived only by promising sweeping reforms in the October Manifesto. For the first time, Russia experimented with a parliament, the Duma, and civil liberties, although real change was short-lived, with autocratic tendencies soon returning. Yet, once the empire's weaknesses had been exposed, the clock was ticking. When World War I erupted in 1914, Russia entered the conflict as one of the Entente powers. The war placed an unbearable strain on the country. Millions were conscripted, factories redirected to military supplies, and cities faced food and coal shortages. The resulting inflation and logistical collapse devastated the urban population, while the peasantry suffered from requisitioning and forced labor. Repeated military disasters, such as the crushing defeats at Tannenberg and Masurian Lakes, shattered the morale of soldiers and citizens alike. As the war dragged on, discontent morphed into actual revolution. In 1917, the long-brewing storm finally broke. The February Revolution overthrew the centuries-old Romanov dynasty, and a provisional government took the helm, only to be itself toppled by the Bolsheviks in October. Russia withdrew from the war, signing the harsh Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, ceding vast territories and resources for the price of a precarious peace. Yet peace brought no respite. The nation plunged into civil war, famine, and economic ruin, while a new ideology took root and remade Russia as the world's first socialist state. This tumultuous era redefined the empire once built through conquest and war. Imperial ambitions, having brought Russia to the apex of power, now fueled internal calamity. The dream of an invincible empire was over, replaced by new visions, new leaders, and a new world order whose echoes still shape modern Russia. If you want to continue unraveling Russia's dramatic history in the era of revolution, remember to follow the channel. The final segment is coming up next. The Russian Empire's collapse unleashed decades of turbulence that reshaped not only Russia, but the entire world. After the Bolshevik victory in the Civil War, the old imperial ambitions did not disappear. Instead, they transformed under a new ideological banner. The Soviet Union, proclaimed in 1922, sought to present itself as an anti-imperialist state, yet fashioned its own brand of dominance over neighboring countries, first through military force, then through political pressure and economic integration. The aftermath of World War II elevated the Soviet Union to superpower status, pitting it directly against the United States and its allies. The Cold War, born of mutual distrust between the communist East and capitalist West, was waged on nearly every continent through proxy wars, espionage, propaganda, and the threat of nuclear annihilation. In Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union consolidated a bloc of satellite states, stifling dissent in places like Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Poland through force and intimidation. The building of the Berlin Wall and the suppression of uprisings starkly demonstrated the Soviet grip on its sphere of influence. Internationally, the Soviet Union projected power far beyond its borders. It supported revolutionary movements in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, expanding its global influence through military advisors, economic aid, and diplomatic maneuvering. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. Only a last-minute diplomatic compromise averted catastrophe and confirmed the era's stakes, with the US and USSR locked in a rivalry for technological and ideological supremacy. Yet the cost of this global posture was high. Maintaining control over its empire drained Soviet resources. Economic stagnation settled across the Eastern Bloc. In the late 1980s, under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, attempts at reform, perestroika and glasnost, sought to revive the failing system but instead hastened its collapse. Soviet republics declared independence in a stunning cascade, and in 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved. Russia emerged as a new state, bearing the weight of immense political, economic, and demographic upheaval. Still, the legacies of Russian imperialism and Soviet power persist. Conflicts in Ukraine, the South Caucasus, and Central Asia reflect deep historical entanglements between Russia and its neighbors. The aspiration to restore Russia's great power status remains a significant element in its domestic and foreign policy. Echoes of old imperial thinking surface in modern debates over territory, history, and identity. The story of war and imperialism in Russia is far from over. It is a story of rise, fall, and adaptation, from Tsarist empire to communist superpower to the multifaceted Russian state of today. To truly understand Russia and its role on the world stage, it is necessary to grasp the cycles of ambition, conflict, and transformation that have defined it for centuries. Thank you for joining on this journey through Russian history. If you enjoyed this content and want to keep learning about how empires and conflicts shape our world, make sure to subscribe to the channel and follow our upcoming videos.